Coming up, another big Brexit fallout story this week as the government and their enablers try to spin the scrapping of river pollution rules as a so-called Brexit benefit. The government's biggest cheerleader, the Daily Express, gleefully announced that our Brexit freedoms will ditch EU rule to build homes. The EU rule in question, of course, as is invariably the case, sets a minimum standard. In this case, protecting our environment and preventing new build residential developments from dumping yet more sewage into our rivers. After 3 years of Brexit, this is where we are, with our Tory press trumpeting declining standards and broken government pledges on the environment as a Brexit win. In reality, it's just yet another Brexit loss. Stay tuned. I'd really appreciate it if you'd hit the like button, subscribe, and above all, share a link to this video with your social media contacts. A lot to cover in this video, but let me first return to that Daily Express cover story and decode it. Rishi Sunak has torn up Brussels red tape and given the green light to 100,000 new homes in a housing bonanza triggered by Brexit. Translation: the Prime Minister, who has no mandate and no credibility with the voting public, has scrapped a legal requirement in the British planning process mandated by a previous UK government, requiring house builders to ensure that new developments are nutrient neutral. In other words, that they don't add yet more sewage to local rivers. Now, the government reckon that 100,000 extra homes near rivers will be built by 2030, including in the catchment areas of the River Wye and the River Solent. A housing bonanza triggered by Brexit, says the Express, which is a very tenuous link at the very best, and like all so-called Brexit benefits, could have been achieved while still a member of the European Union if we'd had a government willing to invest in supporting house builders to build clean, green housing. What this government is doing instead is allowing house builders to save money by not having to provide evidence that new build developments are nutrient neutral. As a consequence, you can be assured that new housing projects will dump as much shit as they like in local rivers, and then the government's plan is to spend public funds to help clean up the mess that this lowering of environmental standards will cause. It's just bonkers. The Levelling Up Secretary Michael Gove and the Environment Secretary Therese Coffey announced, instead of focusing on stopping residential development, we will tackle this problem at its root. Our nutrient reduction plan will drive action by investing £280 million where it is most needed. Introducing a nutrient reduction plan to tackle the additional nutrients caused by scrapping regulations is the exact opposite of tackling this problem at its root. This statement is like 1984 doublethink. The root of the problem is the scrapping of environmental regulations by this government, and tackling the problem at its root would mean not creating the problem in the first place by scrapping those regulations. The truth is, the post-Brexit Tory government has been under pressure from the Home Builders Federation to remove a whole raft of planning regulations that cost their members money and therefore hit their profits. You wonder what it is about the house building industry, a major donor to the Tory party, that the government finds so persuasive. This latest post-Brexit lowering of standards means that the costs of compliance with pollution standards are moved away from the house building companies and dumped on to the taxpayer instead. A nice little bung from the government to some of their wealthiest donors, with their pals in the house building industry now being given their turn at the trough. Which is the Tory way, as we saw most graphically and publicly during the COVID PPE contract scandal. Perhaps Michelle Mone and Matt Hancock's local pub landlord should set up a house building company together with some of Priti Patel and Michael Gove's pals, funded by a loan from Boris Johnson's distant cousin. This corrupt government just seems to be lining their own pockets and those of their cronies and donors before the public gets the chance to kick them out at the next general election. And it seems no one can stop them. This latest trashing of standards, sense and decency has seen wide-ranging anger and criticism. Back in 1980, the Undertones lead singer Feargal Sharkey yelled at my buddy from the stage at Portsmouth Guildhall, "If you gob at me again, you'll get your mouth busted." I won't do the accent. But nowadays, as a campaigner for cleaner rivers, Sharkey is yelling at the government, telling them through a column in the Times, "You have trashed what last shred of credibility and sincerity you had, and it's quite obvious you were prepared to sacrifice the environment at the altar of political gain." Like me, Mr. Sharkey has spotted the obvious corruption playing out before our eyes, tweeting, "It took just 17 hours of trading, yet the owners of Britain's 3 largest house-building firms go to bed tonight £643 million richer than when they woke up yesterday morning." He goes on, "This was never about preserving our rivers. It was always about preserving Conservative Party donations." I couldn't agree more. And talking of Twitter, how about this from the clearly distressed Royal Society for the Protection of Birds, tweeting, "Liars! Rishi Sunak, Michael Gove, Therese Coffey, you said you wouldn't weaken environmental protections, and yet that's just what you are doing. You lie, and you lie, and you lie again, and we've had enough." That was the start of a long thread from the RSPB, detailing previous lies from this government about post-Brexit environmental standards. The RSPB, not exactly a militant or even a political organisation, yet clearly angered by a government that puts the interests of the wealthy ahead of environmental protection. Chief Executive of the RSPB, Becky Spate, later apologised for the framing of the post, but said that the charity had been frustrated with plans to scrap water protection restrictions for housing developments, saying it goes against previous pledges by this government. Clearly, the RSPB needs to be careful in order to comply with Charities Commission guidelines. But that's not the case for the Office for Environmental Protection, a statutory body set up to provide independent oversight of the government's environmental progress. Dame Glenys Stacey, chairwoman of the Office for Environmental Protection, described the deregulatory step as a regression, stating that the government's scrapping of rules protecting rivers runs counter to ministers' promises not to weaken legal protections for the environment. She echoes the RSPB statement that the government are liars. Tomato, tomato. She has also demanded that ministers make a statement to Parliament as required under the Environment Act. The latest I've heard is that the government has now awarded her the new title of lefty lawyer and granted her membership of both the Blob and the Anti-Growth Coalition. No doubt her new title of Remona will soon be added. Because, make no mistake, this is all about Brexit and what the Tory see as an opportunity to remove protections in order to favour corporations over the public and allow their buddies to maximise profits through the removal of minimum standards relating to the environment, food quality, employment rights and consumer protection. There were 500 or so major items of EU environmental law that were retained in UK law in the short term. In their 2019 manifesto, the Tories promised not to weaken national standards after Brexit. This latest regression on environmental standards is a clear signal that they have no intention whatsoever to stick to their promises, or to use the RSPB's words, "You lie, and you lie, and you lie again, and we've had enough."